dear girl. With her mother, Paris is the daughter of Chicago author Amy Krauss Rosenthal. Paris and Amy worked on many projects together before Amy's death following a battle with ovarian cancer in 2017. Paris.
There was no chance that I was going to wait for the elevator. I ran from the car, up the stairs, and straight into my mom's hospital room. She was not happy to be there, but was eagerly awaiting my arrival. It wasn't the most ideal reuniting hug because she was in a hospital bed, but if I closed my eyes, I could envision the softness of her arms wrapping around mine, the way she kissed my cheek, and I immediately kissed hers back. As we embraced, she probably called me by one of the many nicknames she had for me, which now that I think about it, tended to be some variation of Angel. Angel baby, sweet angel baby, or just Angel. She had a slight complication from her chemotherapy, so she was staying overnight in the hospital, and I was staying there with her on a cot beside the bed. There was no space between the cot and the bed because we pushed it together as close as it could possibly go. That action alone is indicative of our attachment to each other since the day I was born. The good kind of attachment and closeness, though, not the unhealthy kind. We stayed up until midnight talking and catching up. Eventually, I rolled over, my back was facing her, and I closed my eyes in an attempt to rest. A nurse came into the room around 2 a.m. to check on her and noticed she was still up. "What are you doing wide awake?" the nurse asked. My mom replied, "I'm just so happy my daughter is here that I can't sleep." She said that in her sweet, loving voice, thinking that I was asleep and didn't hear it. With my head turned the opposite way, I just smiled to myself. That moment in the hospital happened in winter of 2015. But let me zoom further out and talk briefly about my life and my family before my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. There are 5 people in my family, so I will share 5 traditions that embody what the Rosenthal family is. 1. We create and hang up signs in the kitchen for special occasions such as major accomplishments, birthdays, first day of school, coming home after being gone on a long trip. 2. My parents took us on trips all around the world when we were little, but most of the trips were oriented around some type of community service or community building project. 3. Every Friday night growing up, we passed around a green metal-shaped R for Rosenthal, and we each said what we were grateful for that week. 4. We have had a water fountain in our house for my entire life. My mom was sick of us always asking for water when we were little, so she had the idea that we could just go to the water fountain and get water ourselves. Plus, why not have a water fountain in your house? 5. My brothers and I all have matching R, again for Rosenthal, tattoos, and my parents have each other's initials tattooed on their body. My life is now divided into before my mom's diagnosis and after her diagnosis, or so that's how I see it. I was trying to think of a way to convey how unexpected the diagnosis was. All I could think of was, and then one day, or and out of the blue, or suddenly, and as cliche as those sound, that truly is how the series of events transpired. The first week of my first year at Quest University, Canada, my mom created a group text message with our family and asked to set up a conference call. Fear and suspense entangled my thoughts. I tried to find humor in the various possibilities of what could elicit a family conference call, but that tactic was not successful. I was sitting on a bench on campus, my body turned outwards facing the academic building, but the mountains were still peeking over the top of the building. The suspense finally ceased when my mom told us that she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. piece of news that no mother ever wants to tell their children. Rather, a piece of news that no one wants to receive or convey, period. She had pain in her abdomen for just a couple days before she decided to go to the emergency room to get it checked out. Before the brief 3-day window of pain, there were no symptoms, no signs of cancer whatsoever. So she was extremely healthy before she got diagnosed. She loved to take 1 or 2 hour walks to wherever she needed to go when most people would drive. She enjoyed her glass of red wine, but never excessively drank and never smoked. She and my dad fostered a very healthy environment in our home, which is something I can appreciate even more now as a young adult. I left university to return home just 1 week after arriving. My mom immediately had surgery, followed by 18 weeks of chemotherapy. For my first 2 years at Quest, I went back to Chicago nearly every month to be with my mom. When she finished her 18 weeks of chemo, which was no easy feat for anyone involved, she was cleared of cancer in March of 2016. That same summer, she went in for one of her routine scans, and the cancer came back in July of 2016. When my parents sat me down and revealed the news of recurrence, I didn't even know what to feel. I was for sure sad, but I was also angry. For a split second, I was angry with my mom. Why did you have to tell me such bad news? But seconds later, of course I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at the world. Why my mom? She wasn't going to wallow indefinitely or dwell in this news, and we weren't going to either. She began a clinical trial, which we were hopeful about. Hope was hard to muster up, but it was vital. She did not react well to this trial. In fact, she was intubated and nearly died from it. The clinical trial failed, and soon there was nothing left. Even thinking retrospectively about all of this news that my family and I were forced to sit with is exhausting and overwhelming, to say the least, especially when the news was so up and down. The only feasible option at that point was for my mom to enter hospice. She was in hospice for close to 2 months, and I was with her every single day of it. I could write in another entire speech about the experience of home hospice, detailing all of the ways my family navigated that time, but it is just too nuanced for what I'm attempting to convey in this talk today. There are countless beautiful exchanges and conversations that occurred during hospice. I will share one with you now, and let the others rest comfortably in the pages of my journal. When my mom was dying, we were sitting on the couch in our living room where she was stationed during most of her time in hospice. I was rubbing her arm and trying to soak up every chance that I had to feel her physical body while I could, knowing that soon I would never be able to again. I couldn't comprehend her physically not being there, even though I knew that reality was looming not too far in the distance. She looked me in the eyes and said, "I'm grateful that we had 19 years of an amazing, one-of-a-kind mother-daughter relationship, rather than just a really long, semi-decent one. Don't you think?" Of course I agreed, but I just wish the amazing, one-of-a-kind version could have lasted more than 19 years. The time of diagnosis to death was 1.5 years. Let me say that again. From the time of diagnosis to death was 1.5 years. My world was rocked rapidly and excruciatingly. Let's now delve into the work of Amy Krause Rosenthal, aka my mom, for a minute. My mom was the prolific author of over 35 children's books, 2 adult memoirs, and she made several short films online. Growing up, people often asked me about how special it was to grow up with such a creative mother. The answer is that it was spectacular. One of my favorite parts about my mom's job is that she worked from home. Not only could I spend a lot of time with her, but I was also able to watch her creative process up close and personal. In fact, sometimes I was a part of it. Her first children's book, Little P, started as a bedtime story that she told me before nap time. In that scenario, I helped her by simply asking for a bedtime story. As I grew out of the nap phase of life and could read and write more sophisticatedly, she would often ask me to look over an initial draft of a book or present an idea to me before she delved into writing it. I remember helping her come up with the last lines to one of her children's books and her screaming in excitement when I did come up with it. That was one of her best qualities, the ability to genuinely celebrate someone else's accomplishments. She was my biggest cheerleader, and I sure do miss that. All of my mom's 35-plus children's books were original creations. She was always writing multiple stories at once and constantly scribbling on napkins, on the back of her hand, or in a black notebook. Mid-conversation, she would stop and jot something down, but it was never rude or unusual. It was just her. One day, an editor she had never worked with before approached her with the concept of a children's book about female empowerment. Originally, my mom was going to write this book on her own, but then she had the brilliant idea for us to write it together so that its message could come from the perspective of both mother and daughter. We collaborated on the process, the entire process, of our book, Dear Girl, until it was finished, but she died before its release in December of 2017. While my mom and I wrote Dear Girl together, I am now the book's only spokeswoman. I feel like I am honoring my mom by representing and taking on opportunities on behalf of both of us. I am ensuring that this piece of art that she and I created lives on. I honor my mom in smaller, more personal ways as well. I wear her fracas perfume every day. I drink hot coffee with a splash of almond milk to start my mornings like she did. I wear a ring on my thumb because she used to wear a matching one on her thumb. Moreover, I try to keep my mind open to new people and new experiences like she did. When I just smile at those around me, I feel like I'm channeling her. When I love those who I care about, I feel like I'm honoring her. My mom died on March 13th, 2017. Life has gone on since the day she died. It had to go on. Don't get me wrong, right when she died, I often questioned, why isn't everything and everyone in the world just stopping? There was one day I was heavily feeling that sentiment and asking that question to myself. So I decided to reread one of my mom's books. Rereading her books was, and still is, my go-to activity whenever I feel a wave of sadness coming over me. I reread her very first grown-up book called The Book of 11. In it, she writes, "When someone dies, I feel like the world should really stop, that we should be naked in the freezing cold and quit our jobs and suffer from their absence. That we should utter nothing for weeks but their name, over and over again, until no other words make any sense. But the truth is, the person dies, and minutes, maybe seconds later, we go out and get a burger." The poignancy and insightfulness in which my mom wrote about death long before any diagnosis is utterly remarkable. But life does go on. That's what she would have wanted for my family and me too. There are several examples of how life has moved on for me in the past year and a half. For example, life moved on when a couple of months after she died, I got a summer job working at an elderly home where again I was faced with death frequently. I felt ready to take on this challenge because with the experience of losing my mom, I quickly developed the skills to talk about and be surrounded by death. Later that fall, I went to study abroad in Amsterdam. I always knew that I wanted to do so, mainly because of the positive experience that my mom had when she studied abroad at my age. Life moved on when I returned to Quest and immersed myself as much as I could in my academics. Life moved on this most recent summer when I lived in New York and worked at the Ovarian Cancer Research Fund Alliance. I worked there because I wanted to devote my time to a cause that is meaningful to me. In addition to life going on, I have a new perspective on various things now. I have realized who my best friends are and who I can live without. I understand the concept of time differently now, seeing that things have changed and can change so quickly. I really do try to live each day to the fullest. Looking back on the past year, I can recognize some ways in which my grieving has also shifted. I used to make a point to recognize every 13th day of the month, and was even aware of the entire week leading up to the 13th day of the month. Then one day, it was the 20th of the month, and I realized that I totally missed the 13th, which was slightly freeing, and perhaps I had more control over my grief than my grief had over me. I used to burst into tears at any song that reminded me of her, at any picture of her, and even at the sight of seeing other moms walking down the street with their daughters. When I say burst into tears, I mean debilitating cries that took every ounce of energy from my being. Now I can listen to songs, I can look at pictures, and I can appreciate the utter beauty of a mother walking hand in hand with her daughter. These things still elicit a gut reaction within me, a sadness and a longing, but in a different way, because life has to go on. When I think about the serendipitous moments and opportunities that have arisen from this whole journey, I realize that there are many. 1. My dad was asked to give a TED Talk about grief and loss at the May TED Conference in Vancouver. I was lucky enough to be his one guest. 2. I have developed close relationships with several of my mom's old friends as we bonded through the mutual loss of my mom. Plus, I now have 4 amazing godmothers. 3. Since my family's grieving process has largely been public, I often receive messages from strangers who share similar stories of loss with me, or they just reach out to tell me how touched they are by my story. While it might be easy to lose faith in humanity at times, this journey has allowed me to see and believe in the goodness of humanity, even throughout all of my pain. And finally, another opportunity that arose out of this unfortunate situation is the chance to be here right now and speak to all of you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to my story and for being at this event in the first place. I want to reiterate one of the main purposes of us gathering today, and that is to continue to raise awareness for ovarian cancer. Together, we are a stronger force. My mom expressed something about the end of her own life that I will dwell on indefinitely, which was that she didn't have to all of a sudden say, shoot, I have to completely change around the way I'm living because I only have a few months left to live. But rather, she could remain exactly who she was. She felt good, more than good, about her relationships, about the way she appreciated each day, and about what she had done with her time. That alone brought her some peace of mind. She could live the end of her life the same way she had been living this whole time. I think we can all learn from this in the sense that we should be living our entire lives in a way that would be fulfilling, even if we only had a few months, weeks, or days left to live. Thank you.